I'm working the front desk at a hostel in Melbourne when this guy from Texas walks up to me around 9 p.m. He's got his suitcase, looking annoyed. "Hey man, I need dinner, but everything's closed." "What's going on?" I'm confused because I can hear the restaurant next door is packed. "Mate, nothing's closed. It's Thursday night." He shakes his head. "Nah, I walked past like 5 places. All closed. Doors locked." I step outside with him and point at the Thai place across the street. Lights on, people eating, music playing. He looks at me like I'm crazy. "Dude, I literally tried the door. It was locked." I walk him over there. The door has a small sign, "Push." He'd been pulling on it for apparently 10 minutes, decided all of Melbourne restaurants close at 8 p.m., and came back to complain. The Thai owner saw the whole thing through the window and was dying laughing. Collect these moments from years of working around the world. Narendrai, the kind of stories most people miss because they're not paying attention. If that kind of perspective speaks to you, this is the channel to stay locked into. That same week, an American woman asked me where she could buy normal bacon because Australian bacon was wrong. I asked what she meant. She said our bacon was round and had too much meat on it. She wanted the crispy strips. I had to explain that what she calls bacon, we call streaky bacon, and it's absolutely available here. She didn't believe me, said she'd checked 3 stores. Turns out, she was asking for American bacon, and when staff said they didn't have that specific brand, she assumed we just didn't have the concept. Then there was the college kid who got into an argument with a tram driver about whether Melbourne had metros. The driver kept saying, "This is a tram, mate." The kid insisted, "Yeah, that's what we call metros in America." The driver, bless him, just replied, "Well, you're in Melbourne now, aren't you?" But the kid kept calling it a metro for the entire ride, loudly, like he was teaching us our own vocabulary. My personal favorite was the business guy who tried to tip me $50 for carrying his luggage to his room. When I politely declined, he got offended, said I was being rude by refusing his generosity. I explained we don't have a tipping culture here. He said, "Everyone has a tipping culture. That's how service workers survive." I told him we get paid actual wages. He looked at me with genuine pity and said, "Wow, socialism really got you guys, huh?" Then he left the 50 on the desk anyway and walked off like he'd rescued me from poverty. But that was just the beginning. I'm giving a walking tour through Prague's Old Town when this retired couple from Florida joins the group. We're standing in the main square, and I'm explaining the history of the astronomical clock. The husband interrupts me. "Hey, quick question. How far are we from Paris right now?" I tell him about 600 miles, give or take. He nods, thinking. Then he says, "So we could drive there after lunch?" His wife is already pulling up Google Maps. I explain that 600 miles in Europe isn't like 600 miles in Florida. Different countries, borders, languages. He seems annoyed. "But it's all the EU, right? Isn't that the whole point?" I try to clarify. "Yes, but that's still an 8 or 9 hour drive through multiple countries." He's not having it. In Texas, I drive 8 hours for barbecue. "What's the big deal?" I explain that Prague to Paris crosses Czech Republic, Germany, and France. He'd need to watch for different speed limits, tolls, driving laws. His wife cuts in, "We have GPS. It'll figure it out." They left the tour early to rent a car. I saw them the next day. They'd made it to the German border, got confused by the Autobahn, turned around, and came back. They were mad at me for not warning them properly. I had literally warned them. 3 days later, I get an American student on a tour who keeps calling Prague the capital of Czechoslovakia. Every single time. I correct her gently. Actually, Czechoslovakia split into Czech Republic and Slovakia in 1993. She goes quiet for a second, then says, "Wait, so where are we right now?" I tell her Prague, capital of Czech Republic. She looks genuinely stressed. "But my roommate said we were going to Czechoslovakia." I explain again. She pulls out her phone and starts frantically texting. Later, she tells me her roommate had booked the hostel, and she'd assumed they were in a different country this whole time. She'd been confused why everyone kept saying check. That same week, I'm at a cafe near the castle when an American woman asks me for directions to Austria. Not Vienna, not Salzburg, just Austria. I ask where in Austria. She says, just the border. I want to see it. I'm baffled. You want to see the border fence? She nods enthusiastically. Yeah, for the photo. You know, standing in two countries at once. I have to explain that the Czech-Austria border is just a road. No fence, no sign, nothing dramatic. She's visibly disappointed. That's it? How do you know when you've left? I tell her there used to be checkpoints before Schengen, but now you just drive through. She thinks I'm messing with her. That seems dangerous. What if you get lost? Ma'am, GPS exists everywhere, not just America. The wildest one was the guy who argued with me about whether Prague was in Eastern Europe or Central Europe. He insisted it was Eastern because it was past Germany. I explained that geographically and culturally, Czech Republic is considered Central Europe. He said, nah, anything that was communist is Eastern Europe. That's just facts. I told him by that logic, East Germany would still be Eastern Europe. He paused, then said, isn't it? I just walked away. This is why I make these videos, not to mock anyone, but to decode how perspective shapes behavior across cultures. Most people scroll past that kind of nuance. The ones who don't? They usually subscribe. I'm working at a pharmacy in Amsterdam when this American guy in his 30s comes in asking for fever medicine. I show him paracetamol. He checks the box and immediately looks concerned. This says 500 milligrams. That's way too much. I'm confused because that's standard dosage. He explains, in America, we take like 50 or 100 milligrams max. This could kill someone. I realize he's thinking of a different measurement system entirely. I try to explain that 500 millimeters is normal, it's just half a gram. He cuts me off. A gram? Are you insane? He's genuinely worried now. I pull out my phone and show him a conversion chart. He studies it for a solid minute, then says, why would you guys make it so confusing? Sir, the entire world uses this system. You're the confusing ones. 2 weeks earlier, I'm at a market in Marrakech helping an American family buy vegetables. The mom asks how much the tomatoes cost. The vendor says 20 dirhams per kilo. She stares at the tomatoes, doing math in her head. Finally, she asks, how many tomatoes is that? The vendor, patient as ever, says, depends on size, maybe 5 or 6. She's still confused. But how much per pound? He doesn't know pounds. She turns to me, frustrated. Can you tell him to weigh it properly? I explain that kilograms are the proper measurement here. She sighs like I'm being difficult. I just need to know if it's a good price. I do the conversion. It works out to about $2 per pound. She nods. See? Why didn't he just say that? The best part was watching her husband try to understand the temperature. It was about 35 degrees Celsius that day. He kept saying it felt way hotter than 35 degrees. I explained Celsius versus Fahrenheit. He understood the concept but couldn't shake the feeling that 35 sounded too cold for how hot he felt. He kept checking his weather app, convinced it was broken. This thing says 95 degrees. That makes way more sense. Yes, sir, because your app converts it. He never quite accepted that 35 and 95 were the same thing in different languages. I'm a cashier at a grocery store in Seoul when an American teacher comes through my line with a bottle of milk. She looks at the label and asks me, is this the small or large size? I tell her it's 1 liter. She stares at me blankly. I don't know what that means in real sizes. I try to explain. It's about a quart? Maybe a bit more? She's unsatisfied. Can you just tell me if it's the half gallon or the gallon? Neither, ma'am. It's a liter. She ends up buying 3 bottles because she can't figure out how much milk she actually needs. She came back the next day with 2 unopened bottles asking if she could return them. Our store doesn't do returns on refrigerated items. She left them on the counter and walked out. I'm a waiter at a cafe in Copenhagen, and this American couple sits down at 6 p.m. on a Saturday. They order coffee and pastries. Normal enough. Then they ask what time we serve dinner. I tell them the kitchen opens at 5:30 p.m. so they can order whenever they're ready. The husband looks confused. Wait, you already started dinner service? I nod. He turns to his wife. See, I told you Europeans eat early. She's reading the menu. These prices seem high for lunch. I gently correct her. It's dinner pricing, ma'am. She insists it's too early for dinner. In America, she explains, dinner is 7 or 8 p.m. at the earliest. I tell her that in Denmark, people often eat dinner around 6 or 6:30. She seems personally offended by this, but it's still light outside. That's when I have to explain that during summer in Copenhagen, it stays light until almost 11 p.m. She doesn't believe me. Her husband backs her up. That's impossible. The sun sets around 8 everywhere. I show them the sunset time on my phone. 10:47 p.m. They both go quiet. Finally, he says, "Must be a glitch." Check again. It's not a glitch, sir. It's latitude. They order dinner, but spend the whole meal watching the sun's position like it's personally lying to them. At 9 p.m., the wife says, "This is unnatural." Ma'am, it's literally nature. I'm driving a taxi in Bangkok when I pick up an American backpacker heading to the airport. She's stressed about missing her flight. I need to be there by 14 she says, reading from her ticket. I confirm the time. She checks her phone. Wait, what time is that in normal time? I'm puzzled. 14 CE. Probably 2 p.m. She looks relieved, but also annoyed. Why don't they just write 2 p.m. then? I explain that most of the world uses 24-hour time for official schedules. She's having none of it. That's a military thing. Normal people use 12-hour time. I tell her that actually, in most countries, 24-hour time is the normal civilian standard. She goes quiet for a minute, then says, "Y'all just do everything backwards here, huh?" We hit traffic. She's panicking. How far to the airport? I tell her about 25 kilometers. She pulls out her phone calculator and starts doing math. I watch her in the mirror, very concentrated. Finally, she says, "So that's like 15 miles?" I tell her closer to 16, but yes. She's frustrated. Why can't you just use miles? I explain as calmly as possible that Thailand uses the metric system like most of the world. She mutters something about making things complicated for tourists. Ma'am, you are the tourist. The system isn't complicated. You're just in a different country. I'm working hotel check-in in Buenos Aires when an American businessman arrives. His reservation says check-in is 3 p.m. He shows up at 2:30 p.m. and is irritated the room isn't ready. I apologize and explain early check-in isn't guaranteed. He says in America, hotels always have rooms ready early. I tell him we'll do our best. He sits in the lobby, visibly annoyed. At 2:55 p.m. he comes back to the desk. It's basically 3. I tell him 5 more minutes. He sighs dramatically. In the States, we round up. Sir, it's 5 minutes. He waits. At exactly 3:00 p.m., I call him over and give him his keys. He takes them and says, "You guys are really strict about time here. You literally showed up early, and I still checked you in exactly on time." That's not strict. That's just accurate. The next day, he comes down for breakfast at 10:05 a.m. Breakfast ended at 10. He's upset. I'm like 5 minutes late. I explain that the kitchen staff has already started cleaning and preparing for lunch. He argues that 5 minutes shouldn't matter. I remind him about yesterday when 5 minutes before check-in definitely mattered to him. He doesn't see the irony. That's different. I was waiting. You're making me wait. Sir, you missed the time window. He asks for my manager. My manager tells him the exact same thing I did. He eats lunch at the restaurant next door and doesn't make eye contact with me for the rest of his stay. But the absolute best one I ever witnessed wasn't even my story. I heard it from my friend who works immigration at the Sydney airport. An American woman in her 50s came through with her family. Standard questions, nothing unusual. Then my friend asks the routine question, "What's the purpose of your visit?" The woman says, "Vacation." Simple enough. But then she adds, "We're here to see the kangaroos in the wild." My friend nods. "Lovely. Where are you headed?" The woman says, "We're staying in Sydney." My friend, trying to be helpful, mentions that while you might spot a kangaroo in some outer suburbs, they're more common in regional areas. The woman cuts her off. "No, we booked a hotel in the city specifically because the travel agent said there are kangaroos everywhere in Australia." My friend gently explains that everywhere doesn't mean the middle of Sydney. Maybe some parks outside the city, wildlife sanctuaries, or the bush. The woman is now upset. "This is false advertising. We paid extra for the Sydney hotel." Her husband joins in. "We were told Australia is known for kangaroos." My friend agrees. "Yes, but they're wild animals. They don't just hop around the CBD." The woman wants to file a complaint. Against who? Australia? The concept of wildlife? My friend suggests they take a day trip to a wildlife park or head to the Blue Mountains. The woman refuses. "We didn't come all this way to go to a zoo. We want the real experience." "Ma'am, the real experience is that kangaroos don't live in skyscrapers." The family eventually left the airport, fully convinced they'd been scammed. My friend saw them 3 days later at a cafe near Circular Quay. They were showing someone photos on their phone. She couldn't help but overhear. They'd found exactly one kangaroo at a sanctuary in Taronga Zoo and were telling the story like they'd discovered it themselves in the wild after an epic search. The husband kept saying, "You really have to know where to look." "Sure, mate." The zoo enclosure. Very elusive. Look, these stories aren't about Americans being dumb. Most travelers everywhere make mistakes. But there's something about the specific confidence of assuming the rest of the world works exactly like home that creates these moments. And honestly, we're not laughing at you. We're laughing with the situation. Because next month, an Australian will go to America, try to pay with coins at a drive-thru, and wonder why the speaker box is yelling at them. It's all part of the deal, and these stories, they never stop coming.